All right, so it was good to be out there today. We have a lot of moving parts as we discussed all spring with new players, and like we told the team in the team meeting, this is a different era nowadays in general because you don't have programs where everyone's been there, for years in your program and understanding what the expectations are. And so I'm sure a lot of people are dealing with this, but especially us with the amount of transfers that so many people and guys that are supposed to be significant players being new, even some not even being here in the spring. So I think that's a big challenge of ours, is how well we can get the players to buy in to the values and principles of our organization, what we do here, because that's not going to happen overnight. So the challenge to them is the faster you do that, the better we'll be. I think that team last year did that really well and became a players team. So we have a lot of work to do because those guys had a long time together to get to that point.
Lane, obviously there's a quarterback battle going on. What are you looking for out of those guys? What factors are you looking for to determine who's going to start the Troy game? And how do both those guys, how can they benefit from this being such a competition?
Well, I could have predicted the first question, quarterback battle. We're looking for the guy that, leads the team and moves the team the best. And, the intangibles within that are timing, accuracy, and decision-making. But it's why we also chart things, by production, by series once we get into scrimmages. The guy has this many series, and this is how many points his team scores. So, because that's the bottom line, taking care of the ball and scoring. So I think that competition is great for anybody, especially both of them being young. So I do think that makes you better no matter how old you are. It's good to have around. And guys got to play really good around whoever it is, because you're replacing a veteran quarterback that played extremely well and at times put the offense, especially with injuries, on his shoulders and took it himself to win the game. So that's not, one of these guys isn't going to fill that exactly yet, so it's going to take other people around to help that.
Have you got a timetable when you'd like to have a decision?
Yeah, any time in these you'd like to have it sooner than later, but it's like everything we do here, we deal in analytics. The more information you have, the better you make a decision. So, we can't rush that. I think one time for sure I can remember where we've done that and made the wrong decision because we didn't have enough information. And so however long that takes. Ideally, have never liked that to go into a season, but, would never rule that out, but that would not be ideal.
Lane, after last season, 10 wins and whatnot, is the next step for this program winning the division, getting to Atlanta, that sort of thing? Is that a natural growth, and is this team equipped for that kind of goal?
I don't think like that, and that may be wrong. I think that each year is so new, and especially nowadays with the turnover of your roster, to think we left off here and now we're supposed to go to here. This isn't the NFL where you got most of your roster returning the next year and take the next step. Not just as our roster different, but the people that we play is different. So I don't look at it that way. That's so far, and I'm not saying that's not achievable, but that's just so far from today. We're in the day and trying to get guys better today and figure out, like they just pulled me from film right now, how can we get players better today, and we'll worry about that stuff down the road, and that's outcome based and we're all process based.
Lane, in the spring, I know linebacker was your biggest concern, just mostly with injuries and didn't have them all out there, but also, Austin was out there, Troy Brown, just initial eye test today. And do you feel like they're still the group that's maybe the furthest behind on the defense?
Well, it was good to have those guys back out and healthy. We're looking at a lot of different ways to move people around and see what's best, because that is a big concern for us. And, just got to figure out the best people to play and the best systems to play, because through covering us, like we don't just run a system no matter what and make players fit it. We look at our players, who's the best to play, and then form a system around them. It's why year in and year out we can look different on offense and defense. So I think defense, this is a year where you're going to do a lot of that because you lost a lot of moving parts and some really unique players. So we're going to have some challenges there and have to figure out what's the best way to play and how many D linemen and linebackers and DBs to play with.
Lane, when do you kind of get to that point as far as like forming the system around those guys? Is the first couple of weeks just evaluating, all right, who's ready to go, who can actually, be in that position? I mean, when does that what's the progression of camp, if you will?
Yeah, again, we're just into today, which would be a lot more evaluation of an individual player, how they're moving, how they're playing, where they're at from last time we saw them, or for some even the first time that we've seen them, and then eventually figure that out. So that's kind of like the quarterback thing. It's more important to just take today, and then when that comes, figuring out. So improving each player individually is a lot more important than the exact scheme right now.
You mentioned how you were able to get last year's team to buy in, so how do you get this year's team to buy in?
Well, that's a lot more challenging because I feel like, we didn't lose a lot of players from year one to year two, that had really significant roles compared to now year two to year three. So I felt like we had 2 years with those guys. Most of those guys were now, if you look on paper, what should be what you would probably look on paper and say these are the significant players. A lot of those guys, a number of those guys are brand new. I mean, I look out sometimes like we're in 7-on-7 and, and I look over there and we actually play 8, on defense because it's drop 8. And I'm looking and 6 of the 8 people, didn't sign here out of high school or transfers. So that's just a challenge that we're into, and we've got to make sure that we're looking at everything like we always do, including do we simplify our systems because so many people, are new, to make sure they're playing fast. So we have a lot of work to do schematically, but especially culture-wise, to get those guys to understand this is how we do things. It's like a blended family coming together that these kids have been parented somewhere else. Not that we're better, but we're different than what they're used to. So,
Lane, have you seen any progress towards that buying in since maybe the spring to now? Have you seen any progress in that realm?
well, it's been a half a day, so we'll see more. And a lot of times the first day, it's easy to have energy and do the right things. So probably pretty hard to answer that right now.
I think it was during media days, Kirby Smart kind of brought up the idea that you survive fall camp in terms of your health and all that kind of stuff. I guess, how do you sort of balance knowing you got to keep the team healthy with knowing you have some things to kind of figure out?
Very challenging, different year to year, based off of what you have returning and what you already know about them. And, you've got a significant player that's already played for you and started for a full year or two. You don't have to push as much physically. Versus all these new guys that not only need to learn how to play in your system, they need to learn how to play together. So, it's kind of like a basketball team, free agents, like they got to play a lot of pickup together, to learn each other.
Hate to go back to the quarterbacks, but a couple of years ago, Matt really struggled over in Fayetteville. You stuck with him, and he talked about how big of an impact that made on him. How are you on playing 2 quarterbacks? What are your thoughts on it? If that were to be a situation you'd have to consider.
Well, I hope we're not considering what to do after 7 turnovers, including 6 interceptions. So I think it was 6, right? So we're kind of think more positive around here than that. So, hopefully we don't have to worry about that, but we're always going to look at everything as what's the best for the team and not just do things because we've done them that way before. That's our motto, and it's no different with, playing quarterbacks. But in general, I think it's different. I think people pull them too fast, and it's not like a pitcher that just goes in and, pitches the next, 4 days later or something. I mean, there's a lot of mental stuff to playing quarterback, and when you get pulled, that's a big deal. So to me, you better make sure the guy had every opportunity, and what's going on is his fault. People pull people off of production, like the guy throws 3 picks, but doesn't look and say, well, actually 2 of them were tipped or the receiver ran the wrong route. And they just pull them because it's what it's supposed to do so that I look good when I come in front of you guys after the game. So that's not, as you guys know, what we do here.
Lane, obviously all these fall camp days are important for, scheme and development and whatnot. But just how important is that first day of fall camp as far as just establishing a tone for just the remainder up until the season?
I mean, it's the only day we have, so, it's important, but it's a long time, so all we can do is just get better today. But again, we don't have pads on, and there's a ton of work to do, so, we're not making a lot of decisions off of today.
Hey, when you got a dog, did you think it would become a recruiting tool?
I think a lot of things in my career maybe seem like they're planned, how they come out or in my life. And so this was not, but it looks like pretty brilliant, actually, that, the dog was a recruiting tool, and College Game Day's already been here for a special on him that'll air later on, and, has his Twitter and Juice Fest and all this, but that was not. This was just my daughter wanting a dog, so, which I really didn't want. So, but
What have you thought as you have watched the evolution of Juice?
I actually, as you asked that, things happen, you don't know why they happen in different things, and you probably wouldn't think Juice would make me look at coaching better, but, Wild Rose now, today's the 3rd day, because I don't know how to train a dog, and I don't really do what they tell me to do, so Juice is not really well behaved right now. So Wild Rose came and got him. Today's day 3 for training camp. So he's on day 3 of training camp. They come get him in the morning, take him out. They give me a list of notes. Okay, this is what he does well. This is what we did today. They actually video the things. And actually this morning, meeting with them about it, I was like, there's so much similarities here to buying in and bringing people into culture, because he's going to, okay, hey, we're bringing him in, and all of a sudden he's around these other dogs, and how well they're trained has a lot to do with the training to him, and him not being distracted by all the other things. And I was like, you guys are going through the same thing we're going through. When you bring people in an organization, transfers in, getting them to buy in, and here's the puppy that he's taken over there with these other dogs that have been trained the whole time, and Juice ain't listening to what he's supposed to be doing. So I kind of feel like that's some of our transfers right now.
So when you're home, maybe you warmed up with Juice, y'all cuddle?
Yeah, I did not think that was going to happen. I think probably the typical kid gets the puppy, loves the puppy nonstop, and then all of a sudden you're taking care of it. Well, that's what happened this summer. And now that Juice isn't quite so cute, she doesn't want to take him anywhere anymore. So the dog actually sleeps with me now and kind of goes everywhere with me. So kind of typical story.
I wish I had a good Juice question. So talked to Jonathan Mingo a couple of weeks ago.
He told me, by the way, too, for those that have teenage kids, the day he comes in, he's like, okay, we meet, the Juice plan. And I'm like, here's my problem. Now all of a sudden, he's over there, and I say, Juice, come here, and he doesn't come. He just does his own deal. He just starts walking over there, and I'm like, at first he used to follow me everywhere. And he's like, well, in dog years, he's a teenager. So think about your teenage kids when they don't listen. That's what Juice is right now at 5 months. So kind of came hand in hand with parenting there. I understand. Except you don't send your kids away usually.
I was going to say, so which is easier, dog or parent or kids?
I don't know. The teenage daughter thing's probably as hard as it gets. So
I asked Jonathan Mingo a couple of weeks ago about Michael Trigg and if Kenny Yeboah was a good comparison. And he thought for a second, he said Kyle Pitts might be a better comparison. What do you see when you look at Michael Trigg, and is there a comp that kind of pops into your mind for his skill set?
I missed the beginning. Who made the comparison?
Mingo mentioned that at
Okay.
media day.
Well, Mingo's not exactly a personnel director, so I wouldn't call him Kyle Pitts right now. So he's got a lot of talent, and he does have height, weight, speed, hand combination to be a great player, but he's got a long ways to go. And again, like some of these guys, we think they're older than they are because they transferred. He just finished his true freshman year. So, you know, got a very high ceiling. There's a lot of talented players out there. So, a lot of work to do to be a great player. And I would not call him Kyle Pitts.
He brought up Juice. So Juice Fest, I guess, wasn't really a planned thing for the theme of it, right? So you just got a dog and you end up having a recruiting weekend themed around it. Does that kind of speak, also bringing the car out, to how recruiting, the absurdity of it's kind of changed? You know what I mean?
You know, I didn't make this up here. I think I said it before. You know, like we don't think outside the box. We just create a new box. And I didn't make that up. We actually had Randall Joyner, who's been here for a year now, and he was talking to some people, to a recruit and some parents, and explaining like how coach does this, how this program's run, and he used that term. And so I just kind of thought about that. It really is how we do it, and that goes in with this stuff. So instead of sitting and saying, well, recruiting now isn't like it used to be and it should be different, and you know, they care too much about taking pictures and photo shoot, is what it is. So figure out a way to do it really well. So we have some really creative people in that area, especially over this last year, to where, you know, they come up with ideas of these cars and Juice Fest and what kids want nowadays.
Hey, Lane, kind of following up on the recruiting, it looks like you guys are having more momentum with high school kids. A year ago, you know, that was heavy on the portal, obviously. Has your philosophy regarding the mix between transfers and high school kids changed at all?
No, I think that's a combination of getting out of COVID, so you can recruit more and, you know, and be out in the spring, and kids can be here more often, and that's a product of success. So recruiting usually improves when you win on the field. And so when you have a year, you know, when you get to a program and it's down, you've got to say, hey, come here and this is what it will be like. Well, that takes a lot of faith to do it. Versus when you win, now you get to say, hey, we're already winning, so it's a cool thing to do now. You know, go there, they got cool uniforms, the players have fun, they win 10 games, like, so that makes it a lot easier. So I think that's more of a product of success.
Lane, just kind of what's the most important thing about this first day of camp and kind of just the beginning, the first week of camp? What's the most important thing to kind of get done and learn?
Well, I think because of the ratio of new players on the roster is really a lot of, you know, how we prepare, how we practice, not as much scheme necessarily, and getting everybody on the same page that way. I mean, we got players out there today tackling people, you know, so there's a lot of work to do.
It's about recruiting, kind of piggybacking off of Neil. As far as working with the numbers, right? It used to be 25 high school kids, and that's who you signed. But now with the portal, how do you balance that when you have that, or that increased interest from kids that might want to commit or whatever it might be? How do you balance that, knowing you might have portal numbers to deal with later?
Yeah, I mean, that's always moving and adjusting, and I don't think that, you know, you say it's this many and this many, because there's too many variables. Guys leave early, guys transfer, development of your players over this year, you know, before the next year's class come. And, you know, do you have a chance to get really good high school players? Well, then take them. If you're sitting there saying we're not sure, then wait on transfers. So the better your program is and the more you win, probably, you know, the more you sign high school players. And you kind of see that the elite programs aren't usually signing a bunch of transfers because they're just filling spots. They're not filling gaps, you know, because they've been recruiting at a really high level for, you know, 3-4 years of their roster.
Lane, I know it's early, but what are you the most excited about with this backfield? I mean, is it going to be, I mean, with some guys who are presumably behind Zach Evans and Ulysses Bentley. Is there a lot more, to that, or what are you just most excited about with this backfield compared to some of the other ones you've been a part of?
Well, I say there's good and bad to everything, so when you lose what you did with so many players in the backfield and you have new ones, that's bad, but it's also good because you got new ones to learn about, and you may use them in different ways than the last group. So just figuring that out is exciting and fun to do, and it's usually better just to have your whole team returning, but sometimes this makes you a better coach because you got to figure new things out.
All right, thanks, Coach.
All right, guys. No, he is. No, he's a lab, but he is a English lab. Yes, because I'm not getting into this, but I think there's English and American, and he's